Okay, sorry about the long delay between videos. Just a couple of disclaimers before I get started. Yes, I am aware there are holes in my shirt. This is part of the reason why. Him and his three siblings have a tendency to like to chew holes in my shirt. And I used to have a shirt that I reserved for filming that I was not supposed to wear after filming, and I forgot to take it off last time, and I'm kind of broke right now, so I don't have any holeless shirts, and I guess it fits pretty well with my whole stupid looking bum aesthetic. Let me get him off the camera so that way he doesn't burrow in my shirt and become a distraction. Oh. Music of the Year 2001. One of the iconic music genres of 2001. Pop, hip-hop, metal, and jazz. Okay, yeah, I know it's not exactly the most relevant genre in this day and age, but even as recently as the 2020s, there's still some very serious players in the world of jazz, let alone 2001. However, finding key releases for jazz in this era is a little tricky because 2010s you have pretty strong enthusiasts that list their favorites for each specific year, but the 80s through the 2000s is a bit of a tricky period because a lot of people stopped caring even though there were a lot of great releases coming out. So compiling this list was a little tricky. I was told that I could use Rate Your Music to try to pinpoint better examples of what people considered to be best, but I had a little bit of difficulty navigating Rate Your Music, so I'll have to do a little bit more digging for any future year in reviews, but hopefully what I've selected for this particular section will do jazz justice for the year. Now again, 2001, this was the era where a lot of people stopped caring about jazz. Norah Jones hadn't come out with her key release yet, so people didn't even care about lounge jazz at this point. There were a few pretty popular artists like Diana Krall, but a lot of people don't really consider that real jazz. Back in 2001, it took a lot of jazz musicians decades to really build up their reputation. With very few exceptions, you wouldn't see your career start to really take off until you hit the age of 50. Lounge jazzers had it a lot easier, being able to make something of a name for themselves as a novelty act, but that was about it. At this point, jazz was only making small incremental progressions, unlike its heyday where there was so much going on and so many key players that jazz was just exploding. One thing that we can definitely say about this era is that there were a lot of people combining elements of electronic music and even hip-hop into the world of jazz. But just because it doesn't innovate doesn't mean it's not good stuff. So let's go ahead and go through my relatively short list of albums. Cachaito, Orlando Cachaito Lopez. Okay, this is something that's a little bit more Latin jazz, but I'll go ahead and throw it in here. Man, this thing has some groovy experimentation on it. This guy was the nephew of Israel Cachaito Lopez, who was pretty famous for his experimentation in mambo music back in his day. Orlando was considered the second coming of Israel. Now, Orlando had decades upon decades of musical work to build up to an official recording, and this thing really blows you out of the water. There are a couple of moments of meandering that you tend to get in a lot of jazz albums, but nothing that goes on for too long. I especially like that one moment where there's this big hip-hop beat that seems to come out of nowhere, and you think it's weird at first, but somehow Orlando just makes it work. I really need to get into more Latin jazz because this stuff was right up my alley. A-. O'Neill's Porch, William Parker. This is the second best jazz album of the year, and it's pretty freaking fantastic. Parker didn't start making a name for himself until the late 90s and early 2000s, and this is considered his masterwork. And you can easily see why. Some of the musicianship on here is absolutely mind-blowing. There are moments of intensity on here that completely lift you away, My personal favorite moment is Song for Jesus, which sounds like a weird little experimentation on Jingle Bells, and then they just completely go off the rails with it. This thing straddles the line between conventional and free jazz in just the right amount. For me, free jazz can sometimes just get a little too free for its own good, and it stops really feeling like music to me. But this thing has the perfect balance between experimentation and accessibility. And for that, in a modern jazz album, is pretty mind-blowing. There's also this song where the drummer starts, I forgot what the name of the actual term is, and I'm sure someone in the comments is going to tell me, but like where the drummer taps the drumstick against the rim of the drum. But they use this as the basis for the entire song, and it's just incredible. Not much more I could say about this one. It's a pretty excellent listen. A+. Hyperion with Higgins, Charles Lloyd. I may sound like I absolutely love every form of jazz when you watch a video like this, but for me, there's gotta be a level, like a balance between the experimentation and the accessibility, and sometimes some jazz just aims too much for accessibility. This thing was listed pretty frequently as one of the best jazz albums of the year, and I think the reason why is because Billy Higgins, the drummer on this album, passed away just a few months before its release. And I'm not gonna knock Billy Higgins at all, but this album is just kind of background music. And I tried a couple of times to see maybe if there was something I was missing and just try to be more attentive to it, but a lot of times I just felt my mind wandering and it's hard to really keep my attention. That's not to say it bored me, it sounds nice, but there's gotta have more to it than just sounding nice. So the best grade I can give this thing is a B, just for being good and nothing else. Black Stars, Jason Moran. And here we have one of the best jazz albums, not just of the year, but I think one of the best of all time. The piano work on this is absolutely top-notch. This thing hops between elements of post-bop, classical, and even hip-hop at some points. And there's not a single instrument on here that would usually be considered part of hip-hop. But the way they play out the rhythms, you can definitely hear the influence in here. Unlike the rest of the people on this list, Moran was relatively young when he made this thing. And the fact that it got the recognition it did really tells you how talented this guy is. And he didn't do it on his own, he had the help of multi-instrumentalist Sam Rivers. And Rivers is also pretty fantastic, although he is a couple of generations removed from Moran. But the way these two play off of each other and the fact that they do it so well just shows that music can move past and through generations. There's a moment on here, I forget which song it is, but the piano starts playing the Funeral March, and the way they just break it down and have it fit within the context of the song is ingenious. This thing just falls short of an S tier. I have a feeling that if there was just that tiny bit more oomph, I would think this thing is a masterpiece. A+. And there you have it, my list of essential jazz albums of 2001. Join me next time when I talk about slowcore, which I'm sure will get 0 views. See you later.